In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the front struts on this Volkswagen Tiguan. These are going to be located behind the front wheels. Let's get into it. In the back, behind this cover, just twist to the left, pop that out. You can see where this is held down. We're just going to pop this holder off, pull the jack out. There's a utility bag right here. Open up the utility bag. And you want to find this pick. We're going to use that. Now take the hook tool that you got out of the back. And we're going to take these caps off. Pull those off. Using a 17mm socket, we're going to take these lug bolts off. Before I take the last one off, I'm just going to hold the wheel, prevent it from falling. And then grab the wheel, slide it off. I'm just going to spray a little rust penetrant on the nut for the sway bar link, just to make it come off a little easier. Using an 18mm socket, go over the nut, start loosening it up, and then we're going to use some locking pliers on the back side of the stud because it's spinning. Just lock those on, lock those in place. Because the stud is spinning, we're going to use an 18mm wrench on the nut. And on the stud, we're going to use a triple square socket. This is a M6. All right, we got it moving pretty good. We're going to go back to using the impact. Take that nut off, slide that out. Disconnect the wheel speed sensor. Just going to use a straight blade screwdriver, a pocket screwdriver. Just loosen up the retainer. Just pull back on the lever right there. We're going to remove this bracket that has the wires for the ABS and the brake pad sensor and also the hose. Use a 10mm wrench, loosen up the nut or the bolt right here. I'll just switch to a ratchet wrench to make it easier, 10mm. Take that bolt out. Then this is going to be loose. Now we're going to take these two caliper bracket bolts out with the caliper. Use a 21mm socket. Loosen these up. I'm going to slide this off using a brake caliper hanger. Bring it over here. I'm just going to hang it on that bracket right there. Now at the base of the shock, we're going to loosen up this nut. Use a 18mm socket on the nut. And then on the bolt side, you're going to use a triple square socket. This is a M14. We're going to use that to hold the bolt. And loosen it up. There we go. That's loose. You take the nut off. The bolt's kind of frozen in there a little bit. That's okay. I'm just going to try to loosen up the bolt. I'm just going to use a hammer. Just give it a tap. And just take the bolt out. At this point, if you wanted to try to slide this down the strut, you can, but you're going to get stuck on the axle. The axle is not going to be able to flex that way. It's going to be very difficult if you just tried to take this out without going any further. We're going to take the axle out of the hub and the lower ball joint. Take that out of the way. It's just going to make it a lot easier. I'm going to remove the rotor. I'm going to use a T30 socket. Take this screw out. Grab it, slide it off. If it's stuck on there, you can just hit it in these locations. We're going to remove the axle bolt. I'm going to use a 24mm 12-point socket. Take that off. Now we're going to remove the tie rod nut. I'm just using a pry bar just to pry down on it, just to make sure it doesn't spin. Use an 18mm socket. Take that off. Now you can use a front end tool to disconnect this from the knuckle. Sometimes you can just tap it with a hammer. I'm going to use a puller just to separate the tie rod from the knuckle. Just a front end puller. Separate that, set that aside. I'm using a 15mm socket. Take these nuts off. You can separate the control arm from the ball joint. Use a pry bar, just pry this down. You can pull the axle out of the knuckle, just like that. That's good. Now right in the back here there is a slice. You can just take a pry bar and just try to separate this a little bit, but they do make special tools for this. You can use one of these spreaders. I'm just going to tighten this up a little bit. Want to support it and then tighten that up a little more. I'm just going to tap this down. There we go. And then the tool's in the way right here, so I'm just going to take that off. You can move it to the bottom part. Slide the knuckle right off the strut. We're going to remove the wiper and wiper arm. Before we do that, we just want to mark on the windshield where it is so we can put it back to the right location. I'm just using a wax crayon. Just make a mark. Then do the same on the other one because we got to take both of them off. That's good. Using a pocket screwdriver, I'm just going to pop this cap off. Using a 13mm socket, take this nut off. Grab the wiper arm, rock it back and forth. You can use a puller if you need to. I'm just going to use a puller. Just get this lined up. Just tighten this down. The arm off, and we're going to do the same on the other one. that off. I'm going to take the weather strip, pull that up, out of the way. And these clips, I'm just going to pop these out. Just use a straight blade screwdriver. This one's attached to this wire right here. Pop that out. It's going to stay out of the way. Just pull the cowl up. I'll just use a trim tool. Just get underneath here. Just pop this up. Pull that off. And if you're doing the other side, you're going to take this one off as well. We're going to take these bolts out. Use a 13mm socket. And before I take the last one out, I'm going to need to grab the spring and strut assembly underneath. And take this bolt out. Pull the assembly right out. Now take the assembly, get it lined up, and we'll get the bolts started. Might have to wiggle this around a little bit. All right, got that started. Get the other two started. We're not going to tighten these up completely. We're going to do that after everything's together underneath. Makes it a little easier to move. And this is free to twist. Now take the knuckle, slide it onto the strut. And we have that extra tool right there. We're going to take that off. And that stays on there. If you don't have that tool, you're just going to have to hammer it up a little bit, maybe spread it slightly with a pry bar. Now we're going to put the bolt up. Just make sure that the knuckle is all the way up at the base of the strut. You can see where there might be a lip. That strut has to be at that lip. Put the bolt through, same way it came out. Put the nut on. And we're going to snug this down. It is recommended that you replace this bolt. And we're going to torque this nut and bolt to 52 foot-pounds and then an additional 90 degrees. Good. I can slide the axle in. Get the studs for the little control arm in. There we go. Put the bolt in for the axle. We can snug that down. We'll torque that later. Put the nuts on. Snug those down. Now we'll torque these to 73 foot-pounds. Take the tie rod end, slide that into the knuckle, put the nut on, get that started. I'm just going to use a pry bar, pry down on the tie rod, prevent the stud from spinning. Snug that up first. Torque that to 37 foot-pounds. Put the rotor on. Line the hole up with the threaded hole, get the screw in. Just snug that down, not too tight. Take the caliper hanger off. Slide the caliper over the rotor. Put the caliper bolts in. Just make sure the bracket's out of the way. That's good. Snug these down. Now torque these bolts to 148 foot-pounds. Now we're going to take the bolt for the bracket, get that started. And just snug that down. Connect the connector for the wheel speed sensor. Just make sure it clicks in place. That's good. Now slide the top part of the sway bar link through the bracket. Get the bolt on, or the nut on. Get the nut started. We'll use the 5mm Allen key or hex key just to hold the stud, tighten down the nut. And torque this nut to 48 foot-pounds. There you go. We're going to take 2 of the lug bolts, get those started. Take a pry bar. This is just going to prevent the hub from spinning. We're going to torque the nut to 147 foot-pounds. And before we go any further, I'm just going to spin this 180 degrees or 360 degrees. And we'll go again. Just make sure it's torqued. And then you want to go an additional 90 degrees. That's good. And take the bolts out. Snug these bolts down. We're going to torque these to 11 foot-pounds, and then you want to go an additional 90 degrees. good. Now I'll put the cowl cover over. Get that lined up in the right spot. That's good. Push that down. Good. And get the clips lined up. That's good. And put these clips in. And the weather strip. Get that lined up. Wiper arms, get those started, line those up with your marks on the windshield, get the nuts on. Snug those down. And I'm going to torque this nut to 14 foot-pounds. Put the other side on, line that up with the windshield, get the nut on. Snug it down, and I'm going to torque this nut to 14 foot-pounds. Put the caps on, just lock them down. You can clean your windshield. Now install the wheel. Get that lined up. That's good. Get the lug bolt started. Snug those down. Now we're going to torque the lug bolts to 89 foot-pounds in a cross pattern to tighten the wheel down evenly. And just go around again, double check. Now we can put the caps on. And just push those on. Now take the pick tool, put that back in the utility bag. We'll wrap this up. And just tie it up. Place that back inside here. I'll take the jack, get that lined up. This little tie down. Just pull that through. Take the door. Slide the two little tabs in the base and then twist it closed. That was an easy job. Now you're good to go. After finishing this installation, it's important to have an alignment done on your vehicle.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.